turning there to Judges chapter 2, verse 16 through 19. I'm in the middle of a sermon series entitled Cycles. And last week, we opened the floor for questions, and if you have a question, we're going to still allow you to text your questions today while we're in the middle of the teaching. So if a question comes up, just send a message. We don't want you to raise your hand because I need to be able to screen your questions. Amen. I want to make sure you don't say that you got no business. But send your questions and we will answer them. I will answer them live right now. I don't do this all the time. But there was a question I did not get to last week while we're turning to the text. And one question I did not get to last week when we dealt with the first part of the series about how the cycles began. We talked about what's in your genes. What's in your genes? G-E-N-E-S, not J-E-A-N-S. G-E-N-E-S, your genes. The question was, what would have happened if Eve was the only one had ate the fruit? If she was the only one that ate the fruit, then she probably would have been the only one to die. The text said that if the day you shall eat from this tree, you shall surely die. So she probably would have been the only one to die. I don't know if God would have gave him another Eve, or I don't know. I don't know. We just know that we know that the text says she would have died. Now, I hope that answers your question. The point is she ate it, and Adam did too. So we ain't gonna blame her or him. They both of them did it. And to be honest with you, both of them, to be honest with you, Adam is more so at fault than she is. All right, let's get into the meat of the matter. Judges chapter 2, verse 16 through 19. It's gonna be a rough ride this morning. Jesus, keep me there, come. It's gonna be a rough ride. I tried to beg the Lord to let me off the hook with this one, but we gonna see. Yeah. In this series entitled Cycles, we're in part 2 and we'll be dealing with this text today. Say amen when you found it. Judges chapter 2, verse 16 through 19. It reads like this: Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them. And yet they would not hearken unto their judges, but they went a-whoring after other gods, and bowed themselves unto them. They turned quickly out of the way which their fathers walked in, obeying the commandments of the Lord, but they did not do so. And when the Lord raised them up judges, then the Lord was with the judge, and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For it repented the Lord because of their groanings, by reason of them that oppressed them and vexed them. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them, and to bow down unto them. They ceased not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. Verse 19 says, when the judge was dead, they returned to their corrupted lifestyles, even worse than their fathers. When the judges died, they returned to their corrupt lifestyles. I want to talk about why the cycle continues. Why the cycle continues. Last week we talked about part 1 about how cycles began. This time we're talking about why they continue. In order for us to understand cycles, we must understand the anatomy, the DNA of a cycle. Let me read the text from the Message version, just for the sake of translation and understanding and clarity. It says, but then God raised up judges who saved them from their plunderers. But they wouldn't listen to their judges. They prostituted themselves to other gods, worshiped them. They lost no time leaving the road walked by their parents, the road of obedience to God's commands. They refused to have anything to do with it. When God was setting up judges for them, he would be right there with the judge. He would save them from their enemies' oppression as long as the judge was alive. For God was moved to compassion when he heard their groaning because of those who afflicted to beat them. But when the judge died, the people went right back to their old ways, but even worse than their parents. running after other gods, serving and worshiping them, stubborn as mules. They didn't drop a single evil practice. Why? The cycle continues. I spoke with an addiction counselor not too long ago, and I learned something about drug addicts that I did not know. I learned how drug addicts oftentimes revert back to a life of drug use, even after a period of being clean. They will go seek help and they will get clean. He says they are clean, but they're not cured. You can do something different, but you got to still become something different. Right. If you do something different without becoming something different, then you stand a huge chance of going back to what you know. I discovered that the enemy is not threatened by you getting clean. The enemy is not threatened by you getting free. As a matter of fact, he uses that as an illusion of freedom. He uses that because you've gotten free before. He makes you think that it is okay. You can choose to quit and break this cycle anytime you want to. Remember the last time you were free for 3 months. You were free and clean for 6 months. You can do it anytime you want to. So no wonder the Bible says that he whom the Son set free is free indeed. Why? Because there is a difference between being free and being free indeed. Anybody can get free. Here's the difference. Anybody can get free, but the difference between free and free indeed means I got free, but free indeed means I remain free. So cycles that we develop happen because we continue in this cycle of behavior, because we get free but don't remain free. The enemy is not threatened by your ability to change your habits. He's threatened by your ability to change your character. That's why the Bible says, if any man be in Christ, he first must become a new creature. Before old things start passing away, he's got to first become a new creature. Because when you become a new creature, then old things start passing away. That's why grandmama said, things I used to do, I don't do no more. Places I used to go, I looked at my hands and they looked new, looked at my feet and they did too. Why? Because when I got free, I got a new identity. Some people say, I've heard the LGBT movement try to convince the church that people can be born born gay. I'm one of those who will entertain any perspective. And I said, okay, let's just go out on a limb and say you're right, that you can be born that way. Because truth be told, all of us are born in a sin and shapen in iniquity. So let's just say you are born that way. That's why Jesus told Nicodemus, you must be born again. You got to change your identity. And so our featured text for today invites our attention to the book of Judges. The book draws its title from the type of leaders God switched to for the Israelites after the death of Joshua. Judges were not kings, neither did they have that type of power. However, they were spiritually appointed military leaders. Israel, because you know, Israel usually won their wars. They won physical wars with spiritual weaponry. God would oftentimes purposely and intentionally send Israel into a war against a foe of someone who's inhabitant of the land God promised them. And in order for them to get the land God promised them, when they would get there, they would find a people that were already dwelling there. So they had to fight to get what God promised them. Let me pull over right there for a moment. Don't you think for 1 minute, don't you believe this socialism hype that tells you if God gave it to you, you ain't got to fight for it. The devil is a lie. You got to fight for your family. family. That's your family. But you better fight for your family. Fight for your finances. Fight for your health. You got to fight just because God gave it to you. Don't mean you ain't got to fight to keep it. Most of the people they will come up against, they had physical weaponry, but Israel was victorious because of their spiritual weaponry, which reminds me, let me pull over and talk to you saints and remind you that the weapons that we fight with are not carnal. You cannot fight the enemy with his own stuff. You can't cuss out a spirit and shoot and stab a demon. You got to go to war, and you got, no wonder the Bible said we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. We win on our knees. Praise is our weapon. Prayer is our weapon. God will show mercy to his people. When God wanted to show mercy to his people, he will send a judge. Wait a minute, Pastor. When God wants to show mercy to his people, he will send a judge. He will send a judge. Now, oftentimes we don't associate judge with mercy because we don't really like judges. We like folk to judge us. And truth be told, biblically speaking, Jesus says, judge not, lest ye also be judged. But it also says, judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. Now, with that being said, when Israel would get in trouble, he would send a judge to show them where they messed up, to remind them of the law, and then help them with deliverance. Can I explain something to you? Judgment is always, when it's used right, is a form of deliverance. As a matter of fact, godly judges deliver you. Evil judgment detains you. In other words, if it's godly judgment, they gonna judge you and tell you this is wrong, what you did. But they will also tell you this is how you get out of what you did. This is how you fix it. Yeah. But then there are some folks who judge in evil ways where all they really do is just tell you what you did and they keep reminding you of what you've done. And if the Lord has cast your sin into the sea of forgetfulness, who are you to keep reminding me of what I've done?
Yes, sir. That's all right.
So God will send judges to remind them of who they are and what God told them. And after Joshua's death, Joshua died he was 110 years old when he died, and he did not give them, God did not give them another leader. He gave them a landlord. Moses, then there was Joshua, and when Joshua died, there was no more leaders. He gave them a landlord. All they had was land, law, and the Lord. That's all he gave them. Land, law, and the Lord. God was their government. God was their government. He tells them, it's simple, obey my law, and I'll protect your land. That's what he gave them. That's what the formula. He said, obey my law, and I'll protect your land. God opens chapter 2 by asking them, how could you? After all I did for you, I delivered you from Egypt. You prayed 400 years that I bring you out of Egypt. I brought you out of Egypt. I led you to the promised land. I promised to never turn my back on you and to keep my covenant with you. All you had to do was stay loyal to me. How could you? Have you ever heard God say, how could you? How could you do me like this? Somebody have a question. Yes, ma'am.
The first question is, why was their heart not changed?
Oh, I'm getting to that. I'll tell you, I'm getting to that. What was the next question?
The second one is, how can you really clear your thoughts from your past?
How can you clear your thoughts from your past? I'm so glad you asked that question. Let me tell you here, let me give you a real simple path. Number one, confess, repent. Confess, repent. Confess, repent. Number one, admit it. I did it. I did it. Stop lying about it. Just say you did it. Whatever it is, they can't tell it on you but one time. You did it. I did it. And when you confess it, you go and repent. Turn around from it and about what you've done, usually they the folks that got the most unconfessed sin. There are two types of people in the world, the caught and the uncaught. And some of us fall into that category I like to call finna get caught. Hope that answers the question. Okay, good. Now listen. He led them to, he did all this, and he said, Lord, he asked Israel, out of all I've done for you, how could you betray me like this? Verse 7 shows that they served God all the days of Joshua. And even Joshua's elders that were living at the time, and that outlived him, they served God all the days of Joshua. They knew God, but the generation behind them were a different part. They were a different breed. They were a different cycle. You know, the senior saints in the church are terrified when they look at the generation behind them and they don't see a level of reverence for God and holiness for God and integrity for God. They are terrified because everything they worked to build and establish right here, they want us to continue, but they wait on us to get holy enough to carry it out. It's frustrating when you've invested blood, sweat, and tears into Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church, and you got to trust into a generation that think it's okay to shack up and live any kind of way and fall up and preach Pastor Jacob in here and scared of nobody. You can't live any kind of way and then expect God to reference your house. Lord is saying, how could you? How could you?
That's all right.
How could you? How could you do that to me? With all the bills I kept paying for you, all the ways I made for you, all the doors I opened for you, the job I got you, I kept you, and all the stuff you've been through, everything wasn't a lie. Some stuff you did, and I kept you through it, and you still betrayed me. How could you?
But
We quit to pray and celebrate God giving us a new car. We don't like conviction. Because conviction tells us to get your behind somewhere and sit.
that's right.
Conviction tells us to get right or get left.
Let's do.
What better book to explain on the topic of cycles than the book of Judges? It captures the very iconic cycle of Israel in the time of the Judges. For over 350 years, there was this cycle of sin, suffering, sacrifice, and deliverance. Sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. Sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. Do not miss this. There was a cycle of sin, then suffering, then sacrifice, then deliverance. They would sin, and because of their sin, they would suffer. And then when they would suffer, to get out of their suffering, they couldn't take any more punishment, so they would offer sacrifices unto God. They would go to church and go to the altar and offer sacrifices unto God. And then God would hear them and then deliver them. But watch this. Once they got delivered, they went back to sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. Sin. And here's the messed up part about it, is that usually when we get sick of suffering because of our sin, we try to give God something. Like you can pay God off. No wonder the Hebrew writer says, obedience is better than sacrifice. God is not impressed with your offering if it is not held up by right living. Preach Pastor J up in here. I preach to myself if I ain't got no choice. I want you to understand God don't care nothing about how often you come to church, what office you hold down there, how big your offering is, your sacrifice, and what you learn. If you ain't living right, start with your lifestyle.
Right about it. You right about it.
Sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. Sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. It's a continuous. They lived in this cycle for 350 years. And I thought today, before I tell you how to break a cycle, you must understand the anatomy of a cycle. You must understand the inner makings of a cycle. What goes on the inside of a cycle, because you can't break a cycle that you don't understand.
Yep.
Does this cycle sound familiar? Sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. Because if we're not careful, we'll listen to this and point the finger at Israel.
Somebody.
But mama, what I learned is Israel ain't the only one with this cycle of sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance. We mess up, we pay for it, and then we pray, Lord, if you get me out of this, I won't ever do it again. And then that's what he do. He gets you out, but you go right back and do it again. God be like, be quiet. You be quiet. Or when he leave, you be talking again. Anyway, too much. Anyway, last week we discussed how they begin to break the cycle. We must understand the cycle in order to break the cycle. We must understand the cycle. Now, I want you to understand this, that the cycle was not limited to a group of people. Notice the cycle spans 350 years. With that being said, you must understand this, that if the cycle was spanned over 350 years, the four components of the cycle actually could have been split across different generations. So one generation could have been the sin. Another generation could have been the suffering. While another generation could have been the sacrifice. And a whole other generation could have been the deliverance. Now, there were some that had all four, some participated in two of the four, and we don't know, but I want you to understand that it's not limited to one person. Now, so in order to understand why the cycle continues, there are two reasons, just two. Number one, spiritual adultery. The second reason, that's it, spiritual idolatry. Spiritual adultery, spiritual idolatry. Now, oftentimes you will find all throughout Scripture, both in Old and New Testament, how the church is compared to the wife of God, the bride of God. We are married to God, okay? And if that is true, then any other God we serve is unfaithful. Now, he says spiritual adultery. What do you see there, Pastor? I'm so glad you asked. Look at verse 17. Because you must understand, cycles continue when we flirt with other gods. False gods cater to a specific desire while leaving you empty of your ultimate needs. So, well, Pastor, I don't really serve no idol gods, so this really don't apply to me. Well, what gods have you made a covenant with? Pride, greed, money, flesh, lust. These are all idol gods. Some of us worship our money so much that we'll work till we can't work no more. But God's house don't ever get taken care of because you're so busy chasing your dollars. And Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. You can't serve God and money. Now, look at what in verse 17 what he says. Go here. I want y'all to go here. I want everybody in the building to go to this verse. Because what I'm about to teach now, if you say, I don't want you to think I made it up. Now, this is what God said. I didn't say it. It's what he said. Go to verse 17. And yet, they would not hearken, listen, unto their judges. But they went forward after other gods. They went forward. Did your Bible say that too? I want to make sure, before I teach this, that your Bible said what my Bible said. Raise your hand, that's what your Bible said. So I want y'all to run me out of here, because now Pastor J, now wait a minute now. What did he just call him? What did he just, did the Lord just call the church? I won't preach nothing but the Bible. And I said, okay, wait a minute. I said, Lord, I am employed by a Baptist church and I cannot get up in front of these people and tell them you call the church out of her name. Now, I'm going to do my word study, because maybe that ain't what you meant. And then I did my word study on the word whore. And the Hebrew, it is harlot, prostitute, adultery through fornication. I said, now Lord, I know you're not going to send me up here to tell these people you call the church whores. He said, instead of listening to your elders, you went whore. I didn't make it up. Now watch this. God is the only, because we'll make this stupid mistake by thinking, well, it's in the Bible, I can say it. Wait a minute. God is the only authorized and qualified user of this word. He's qualified to call them that because he's the one holy enough to expect faithfulness. See, we are not faithful. No matter whether, because even though you may be faithful to something or someone, you have been unfaithful to something and someone. We're not qualified to use this word. But why this name? Why this name? Because like us, Israel is married to God. So go to Exodus 34, 15 through 16. Exodus 34, 15 to 16. Now this God talking right here in Exodus. Let's thou make a covenant, because we end up cheating on God with other gods. Oh. They didn't just flirt. They established a covenant. You see, in Bible days, in the Old Testament, when they worshiped another God, they established a covenant with that God. They promised things to that God. They didn't just date another God, flirt with another God. They got in a relationship. They didn't just leave home to be with their side God. They left home and got into a relationship with their side God and developed a relationship with him so much that they established a covenant, a commitment. The text teaches that we have some tendencies. The text teaches us we've got whore tendencies. Stop me where I'm unbiblical. That the moment we don't like God, we'll test drive whatever God makes us feel good. Preach after that up here. Yes. We will use whatever God that and this Exodus verse I just quoted you was given to them after they made their own God. They took all the gold and silver and made them a golden calf, and they gave it to Aaron. Watch this. If you pay enough, there's some preachers, you pay them enough money, they'll make you whatever type of God you want. Make you a God that's okay with you being lesbian and gay and shacking, but sin is sin. You're going to either choose God or go somewhere else. You got to choose ye this day whom you going to serve.
That's all right.
What gods? What gods? I was all right with this. I said, okay, God, what gods? Out of all the gods, go look at verse 13 in the text. 2:13. Go check this out. I had to give y'all these verses because I don't want y'all to think I made this up. Look at verse 13. He tells us what gods they cheated on God with. Verse 13. And they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And what your Bible say? They cheated on God with Baal and Ashtaroth. Now who is Baal? Baal, now mind you, they're in Canaan. Baal is the Canaanite god of fertility. His sphere of influence is agriculture, watch this, animal husbandry, and sexuality. Let me make it clear. His influence was agriculture, which is the grounds, animal husbandry, bestiality, which was what made him the god of fertility. He was the god of all things that was responsible for giving birth. Understand this. Cycles continue when you worship a God that causes you to give birth to their fruit. No wonder the Bible says, and the fruits of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. All these things are fruit of the Spirit. But if you don't have that and you got fruit of something else, then God is not the Father. We'll know who you've been intimate with by the fruit you bear. You cannot tell me you've been intimate with God and you're still hateful, still lying, still backbiting, still cheating. Where is the fruit? We ain't got to call or repose this. God is not the Father.
Preach, son, preach.
Teach Pastor J up here.
Go ahead, right.
Who is Baal? But Baal is not the only one. They didn't just cheat on God with Baal.
That's right.
They went with his wife, mama. His wife was Ashtoreth. She's the goddess of fertility. They went and hooked up with a god couple.
All right.
You cannot be intimate with Baal and then wonder why all your babies come out looking like Baal. Oh, preach Pastor J. Hey, you cannot be worshiping your God of money and then raise kids and expect for them not to look like they daddy. Which leads me to ask, who you been sleeping with? Why did they so easily turn from God to other gods? They were attracted to the short-term benefits of religion and not relationship. They were selfish. They wanted to still be invincible because of the God, while being connected and friends with benefits to a God. They knew that because they were children of the God, they could do anything. That's proven. They have stood toe-to-toe with Pharaoh himself and said, we leave in here and ain't nothing you can do about it. They have developed this cockiness because every time they needed God, he brought them out. So they developed a level of strength and cockiness and arrogance. And now, so they know we can do anything. So we already know what we can do. Now let me go test drive this other God to get my immediate needs met. And so most of our cycles begin with trying to belong to the God while playing around with little gods. The Canaanite God satisfied their flesh in a variety of ways. That's their spiritual adultery. But then lastly is their spiritual idolatry. Look in verse 19. Look in verse 19. Verse 19 says, and it came to pass when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, and following other gods to serve them, and to bow down unto them. They cease not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. Cycles almost always continue through a form of idolatry. Now, spiritual adultery is most times caused by spiritual idolatry. Okay, adultery is the action, while idolatry is the attraction. Okay, adultery is what you did because of your idolatry. Adultery is the action, but the idolatry came because of attraction. In other words, you saw Baal and was like, ooh, look at what Baal doing for Canaan. Ooh, look at Delilah. Ooh, look at Jezebel. Ooh, look at Hagar. Ooh, it's hard to stay faithful to your God When people get what you want from your God, from their God. When you see somebody else's God work for them, but your God ain't working for you, it'll cause you to entertain. We just talking. Me and Bail just talking. I ain't at the church.
Ain't none of that.
I ain't at the church. We just talking. This is why verse 17 says they went after other gods. They were chasing after them. They were curious about them. They became look at verse 2. Go to verse 2. Go chapter 2, verse 2. Go to verse 2, because this right here is what really messed me up. This is why God really got angry. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. You shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? He says to them, you must understand an altar is a place of worship and a place of sacrifice. They were instructed to tear down and throw down their altars. When they got to Canaan, they were supposed to find altars there where the inhabitants worship other gods. And their instructions, when you get here, the first thing you need to do is tear down their altars, their place of worship, their place of sacrifice. Because remember, he told them, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. So he says, when you get here, tear down the altars. And guess what they did? Instead of turning it down, they picked it up. Isn't it funny how God sent you in the world to save the world, and you come back looking just like the world? He sent you out there to change them. But when you come back and we look like them, see, you can put an evil person and a good person in the same company. And after a while, one or two things gonna happen. God, good, is gonna change evil, or evil is going to change good. But somebody is changing. There are two types of people in the world: thermometers and thermostats. Thermostats set the temperature. Thermometers take the temperature. People that are like thermometers, they gonna take whatever the temperature is in the room. But when you're a child of God, you're called to be a thermostat. We set the temperature. I don't care where we are. When we show up, folks start acting right. They got to get it on. Be careful. If you want to know how effective your God is in you, find out what people comfortable doing in front of you. Cycles continue because there's no reverence. When the judge died, so did their loyalty, so did their obedience. They were only faithful when they were being watched. That's the trick. They were only faithful when they were being watched. As long as the judge was there to hold them accountable, they were doing the right thing. But the moment the judge died, so did their loyalty. Did you not know that there are some people in church, they only gonna do right when they're in church? Because the pastor watching. Some of my members, I will not pop up at y'all's house, to be honest with you. I will never pop up at any of y'all's house. Amen. You know why? Because I don't know what, and I can't unsee certain things. And some of my members will tell Pastor, you need to call me before you come, because God's still working on us.
Working on you?
Yeah, working on me too. Yeah. And see, watch this. Here's the problem. When you get there, the problem is what we've taught our kids. Remember, what go on here, stay here. What we've taught them is to live two different ways. Come to church, you be like this. And when you're home, you be like that. And you be quiet about it. You've taught them to be double-minded and to live two lifestyles. The changes we make, even for the better, should be based on Him and nothing else. Because watch this, if our changes are based upon things that change, then when those things change, then so do our changes change. If our change is based upon God, who never changes, then if God don't change, our behavior won't change. But when you change because you want a certain position in the church, then your change is only conditional to that position. So what happens if you don't get the leadership role of the church? You're going to still live, now you're going to go back to the cycle. This happens, why? Because we try God versus choosing God. In other words, we try to get full of the samples of God. We take that verse, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. And we try God. So we use the church as our place to get a whole bunch of God samples. And we think we can get full of samples. And God said at some point, you got to choose me instead of just trying me. You got to choose me instead of trying me. See, a lot of us try on the whole armor, but the text said put it on. This is where we get in trouble. And Israel messed up because they were in this cycle of sin, suffering, sacrifice, deliverance, over and over again. And then God punished them. He says, I tell you what, and in verse 20 through 23, just read that in your own time. He punished them. He said, I'll tell you what, since you can't break the cycle, he said, I'm here to you now. You only want deliverance because you don't want to suffer. But he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you get to the promised land. You in it. But you won't be able to keep it. You won't be able to win in it. You're going to have fights and battles that you ordinarily would never have had. All because you got to prove to me. That's what he said in verse 20. You're going to have to prove to me that you really follow me. Because God is not fooled with your conditional commitment to him. Cycles continue because our behavior is based upon what God can do for us and rarely about simply who he is. I'm not hooping and hollering today because hooping and hollering don't break cycles. A lot of us, we think because we done got slain in the spirit. But what bothers me is that we slave, but we ain't changed. I don't care that you done spoke in tongues. I don't care that you done spoke in tongues and got slayed all out in the spirit. If your feet don't walk straight when you get up, then what was the point of you going down? My assignment today was to help you unpack and expose the things that are in the cycles. Now watch this. Next week, we break in cycles. We break it. I'm going to show you how to, we taught you how they began. Today we taught you how to identify. But next week we're going to give you some power to break them. Because it don't have to continue with you. You can stop it in you before it gets to your kids and your grandkids. That's all I'm trying to say to you. Father, we thank you so much for everything you taught us today. Father, give us the courage to face our cycles head on. And then, Lord, when we see it, give us the courage to stand up and break up the Baal. Break up with Ashtoreth and any other God that we put before you. But we want to come back to you and turn it all over to you. Somebody's here that doesn't know you, needs to accept you as Lord and Savior. Have your way. Lead them down this aisle that they may accept you into their life. In Jesus' name, amen. If you're here today and you haven't got to say it, come on. If you need prayer, come on. You need a church home, come on.